Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. If it looks like I just woke up, it's because I just woke up. That does not actually make me not excited to be here. It just makes my face look tired. Um, I also loved that all of our promotional materials for this were like head into the summer with, like your kids, might be bored over the summer and it's winter here. I have a heated blanket on my
Right
lap
up.
and a cup of tea and I'm very cold. But getting there. But that does I'm yearning for the summer that you all are experiencing. So, um I am really excited to get the chance to share with you about a topic that gets brought up a lot in the circles that I parent in and work as a professional in, as people try to navigate um, making sense of or unpuzzling why it is that children do the sometimes baffling things that children do. And there's kind of this perception of like, well, they might be doing something for sensory reasons, and I don't really know what sensory reasons are or how to know them beyond um, just asking the occupational therapist. And so I'll come here. The problem that I ran into as I decided how to start this lecture is that I kind of want you might be picturing kids who you know in real life, but I don't know their names. I kind of want you to already know some terms so that you can be picturing specific kids, but I have no way of defining the specific terms for you unless I know what kids it is that you're thinking about. So I'm going to introduce you to some hypothetical friends, um, and we'll start there. And then I will explain kind of the basics of sensory processing. We'll loop back to that. And then we will go from there. So this one's for the teachers. Alex keeps singing in class during silent work time. And it's not like the whole entire day is silent. It's not like Alex has to be silent for 8 hours a day. There are just periods of time where everybody needs to work at their desk and and pay attention to their work. And every time they're supposed to, Alex is singing. And Alex is smart. Alex knows exactly what silent means. Alex is even agreeable. Alex will look their teacher in the face and be like, "Yes, I understand. This is silent work time. I'm being silent during silent work time." Um, and then as soon as they're back at their seat and as soon as they get back to their work, Alex is singing. Is this a behavior? What does something being a behavior mean? How can somebody tell whether something is a behavior, whatever that nebulous concept is? Sage is bouncing off the walls. At home, Dad's trying to make dinner. Sage comes running into the kitchen and almost trips over the open dishwasher that Dad was trying to get some silverware out of. Dad shoos Sage out of the kitchen so that Dad can focus. So Sage goes running out of the kitchen and starts climbing on Mom. Mom's trying to read little sister's school book to her and is like, "Sage, get off of me. I'm trying to read the book right now." Sage is like, "Sorry," knocks over a lamp as they climb off, knocks over their little brother's tower that they were trying to build. Little brother is, crying. Little sister is distracted from trying to learn her reading. Dad can't find the thing that he was looking for in the dishwasher. Mom's feeling annoyed and touched out. And Sage is off and running again. Is this a behavior or a series of behaviors? Again, how, what would that mean? Who might, they might be describing that situation to their pediatrician or to somebody on a care support team and feeling like Sage doesn't listen. When we tell them to stop, they don't stop. Sage is, inconsiderate of the other people in the household. Sage has no awareness of personal space or personal boundaries. And all of those things might add up to feeling like this is a behavioral problem. But somebody else might look at the same situation and feel like maybe it's not. And how are we supposed to tell? How are we supposed to tell which of those two people is right? Out and about in the community, Sam shoves another kid to the ground at the park. Sam was playing in the sandbox, super involved in what they were doing, building a really complex sand creation. Um, and another child walked up to see it, uh, put their hand on Sam's shoulder and pointed at part of it and said, "What's that you're building?" And all of a sudden, Sam just shoved the other kid to the ground. Is that a behavior? The parent of the other child might feel very much like, what a terrible kid who, doesn't know how to go out in public and just shoves children. And my kid wasn't doing anything wrong. How are we supposed to know when something is behavioral and when something isn't behavioral? When it's such a abstractly defined concept in the first place. What if these stories that I've just told about different things that could be classified as behaviors are really kids trying to meet their needs? So, let me tell you a little bit more about Sam. This is Sam. At age 3, Sam has always stayed home with their caregiver and has not been to daycare or any kind of formal schooling yet. Um, Sam's parent knows that they are not allowed to make loud noises in the house. Um, if they run the vacuum or if they run the blender while Sam is awake, and especially if Sam is in the same room, Sam is going to lose their mind. And the extended like meltdown that occurs afterward is not worth being able to vacuum up whatever it is when the parent could just wait until Sam is asleep during their nap and their fan is on and they can't hear the vacuum instead. Um, if a siren goes off somewhere near the house or past the house, Sam is distracted and thrown off for a little bit. They have a neighbor who's got a big dog, and the dog barks sometimes, and it really like Sam won't even go in the backyard because Sam is constantly afraid that the dog next door is going to bark. And it's not like Sam can even see the dog. They're not scared of, the dog looking at them and looking scary. They just talk all the time about, what if the dog barks? What if we hear the dog bark? What if we're in the backyard and the dog barks? Um, Sam gets really upset with their hygiene routine, and it stresses their parent out because they feel like, their hair looks unwashed, their nails are really long, and they're worried that other people are going to think that they're not taking care of their child, when really what it is that every time that they try to get their hair in the water to be able to wash it, Sam screams so loud that they're worried that other people are going to think that they're murdering their child. Um and every time that they try to clip their nails, then it's such a extended battle that it feels like it's going to end up in accidentally injuring them, or pinching their skin instead of their nails. And so they feel like they don't know how to do it. They've tried everything that they can think of to explain to Sam why it's important, and ask how they can help them, and they're just not coming up with anything. Sam will only eat a few foods, and their parent asked some well-meaning family members about it, even maybe asked the pediatrician for advice about it, and generally got the answers like, kids will eat when they're hungry, you can just outweight them, don't give them anything else. And so their parent tried once, and for 24 hours Sam would not eat a single food, no matter how hungry or hangry they were. And so their parents caved and went, I can't wait longer than this to feed my kids something that they'll eat. um, Sam went through a phase of exclusively eating ketchup, like not dipping things in the ketchup, but literally just eating ketchup. And so Sam's parents feel really worried about their, body getting the vitamins that they need, and again, kind of what other people will think of what kind of a parent they are, um, especially worrying in anticipation of when Sam goes to school. So looking at Sam when Sam gets a little bit older and starts going on to school, um, in class, Sam shushes the other kids even when they're not being loud. Like if everybody's kind of talking at a conversational volume, Sam still shushing the other kids. Sam, anytime that there's an unexpected loud noise, somebody dropping a book or a visitor opening the door and coming in at a time that wouldn't usually be a routine time for that to happen in the classroom, Sam's really thrown off for a while. And let alone if there's a fire drill, like that's the end of the day for Sam in regards to being able to learn anything or focus. Because even after the drill is over and they're back inside, all Sam can do is be like, remember when we had the fire drill? What if we have another fire drill? The fire drill was really loud. Um, Anytime that Sam gets like a bump or a scrape or a cut on the playground, it's like a whole production. Sam needs to go to the nurse, needs to get a band-aid, needs to get an ice pack, regardless of whether or not the injury level actually warrants that level of response to it. And um, one time there was a playground monitor who like absolutely refused to let Sam go to the nurse and was like, "You're fine. You need to brush it off. People need to, set more boundaries with you." And so Sam would not get up. Sam just laid on the playground and made a production out of the fact that they could not get up or walk anymore because they had not been allowed to go to the nurse. And when a different adult finally stepped in and took over and said, "Yes, Sam, you can go to the nurse," suddenly Sam was magically able to walk, but only to the nurse. Um, Sam is very bothered by other kids breaking rules, but always has an explanation for why they need an exception to the rule. Struggles with transitions and standing in line, especially. Going from anywhere to anywhere else in the school is like a really tough time. Sam will throw away their entire school lunch before they will eat something that they are uncomfortable with. Where other kids will at least eat like the fruit or the bread or the cookie. If food is touching other food, if food has a drop of sauce on it or something that wasn't supposed to be there, um, if food just kind of looks weird, even if it's something familiar that Sam has eaten before, Sam won't touch it. They will go the whole entire day without eating food rather than eat something that makes them uncomfortable. As Sam gets a little bit older, as like a teenager and on into adulthood, Sam continues to startle at unexpected noises, and they're able to describe how they really don't like the way that it makes their heart race when something is too loud, somebody's even not being too loud but just like saying their name unexpectedly when they were super focused or something like that, that it makes their heart race, that it makes this feeling of heightened physiological anxiety inside of them that lasts for a really long time, past when it seems like other people can just shake this off and go on about their day. um, Sam understands that some touch is supposed to be affectionate, but it really rarely feels that way for them. People patting their shoulder or um, rubbing their back or anything that's kind of like light touch or when they were younger, like ruffling their hair. All of that just really feels like an attack on their system more than it feels affectionate. Even though Sam understands logically that it's intended affectionately, it's coming from somebody who likes them. Sam simply cannot eat some foods. Their parents always wondered if they would grow into it and felt like they would as they got older, but especially foods with like a gloopy texture, like yogurt or mashed potatoes. Sam has never been able to eat those, and has never grown into it. So as I'm describing elements of Sam across the lifespan, some of it might sound like you, some of it might sound like you were when you were a child, or some of it might sound like a child who you work with or a child who you parent. Or you might be thinking, well, I feel like Sam about textures of foods, but I don't feel like Sam about noises. Or my kid reacts like Sam about grooming tasks, but my kid doesn't react like Sam about foods, or something like that, where it's kind of picking and choosing. And that's all normal or within the range of normal. And I will circle back to explaining all the components and how they link together a little bit later in this presentation, because right now I need to introduce you to Alex. At the same ages that we saw Sam at. Alex, at the age of 3, a young child before having gone to any kind of formal schooling, only having stayed home with their caregiver. Alex loves to know, even as young as 1, even as young as like 9 months old, Alex loves to know exactly how the routine is going to be for the day and hates when the routine is changed. Like even before Alex was verbal, Alex would prefer it if their parent would say, like at the beginning of the day, as they're getting them up and getting them dressed or whatever, um, you know, today we're going to play at home for a while, and then we're going to go to the store so we can get some milk, and then we're going to go to, um, Aunt Bobby's house, and then we're going to come back home. Like whatever it is, Alex would like to be informed of the schedule for the day even before they could talk, because otherwise they develop a schedule in their own head. And even if that schedule is just, I'm going to play with my trains all day, they do not take kindly to it being interrupted. Um, Alex's parent kind of struggles with how to like categorize them because sometimes they seem really clingy, especially if they go to a new setting or go to a thing with other kids, whether even if it's just like the playground and there's one other child there. Sometimes Alex will just refuse to be put down out of their parents' arms, or if their parent insists on putting them down, they will hide behind their legs. Um, but then sometimes Alex's parent is like feeling lovey and wants to like go for a cuddle, and Alex is like really resistant to it. And so Alex's parent feels like they sometimes can't tell whether their kid does or doesn't want them to cuddle and snuggle and hug them. Alex makes lots of noise to themselves as they play. Um, they even before they can speak, they're kind of keeping up this running little babbling monologue to themselves. Um, and singing and humming little songs to themselves. And it intensifies in certain situations, especially in the car. As Alex gets a little bit older, like 6, and then on through school, Alex is the one who, when the teacher is gone and there's a substitute teacher, then the teacher has left a little note on their thing that says, if you don't know anything or you don't know where something is in the classroom or you don't know what it is we're supposed to be doing next, you can ask Alex about it. Alex knows exactly where things go. Alex knows exactly how things ought to be. On the flip side, if the substitute dares to start reading time 2 minutes early, then Alex is going to be pointing at the clock and being like, excuse me, Mrs. Smith doesn't start until 10:05 and it's currently 10:03. Alex really struggles to be flexible with the changes in the day to day. Alex goes through this phase of like crying and whining every single time that the class goes anywhere, about needing to be the line leader. And their teacher is, tries explaining like everybody takes turns with the jobs in our class and one person can't just be the line leader all the time, and finally offers Alex the job of permanent caboose, always the last one in line, and Alex is content with that. um Alex makes noises during independent work time. That's the story that I shared at the very beginning, where Alex's teacher will pull them aside, explain the rule. Alex agrees with the rule, affirms the rule, is fully on board with being silent during independent work time, and then makes noises as soon as they go back to trying to work. As Alex becomes a teenager and on into their adulthood, Alex tends to plan their life around not going places that make them uncomfortable. Alex knows when to do their grocery shopping at a time of the morning when it's not as overwhelming to them. Alex tends to say no, and has no problem saying no to invitations where they know that they wouldn't really have a good time at that event. They don't seem like they have that social pressure that overrides it of, um, feeling like they're going to hurt somebody's feelings if they say no or whatever. Alex is happy to advocate for their own needs in that way. Alex tends to just avoid places with queues, with standing in line, um, and with crowds. Um, they're not super interested in going to a concert, going to an amusement park, anywhere where they're going to have to stand in a big group of people. Alex carries their headphones absolutely everywhere, when they're riding the bus, when they are working on homework, when they are going to sleep. They've got sleep headphones that they put in instead. When they when anytime when somebody's not like directly speaking to them, they're pretty much listening to music 24/7. Um, they've heard other people say that it distracts them to have music on while they work. Alex feels like they literally can't work if they don't have music on. and feels like their brain is listening to every other little sound in the room if they don't have the music covering it up. So again, you might recognize something of yourself in Alex, or you might recognize something of your child or a child who you work with in Alex, or you might be thinking some parts of my kid sound like Sam, some parts of my kid sound like Alex, and again, all of that makes sense. And I will circle back to that. I have two more friends to introduce you to, and next we are going to talk about Sage. Um, Sage also makes a lot of noise to themselves. Looking at the same ages, 3, 6, and then teenager. So Sage at home when they are very little also makes a lot of noise to themselves. But the noise is usually more like really over the top, enthusiastic, aggressive, excitable. Um, Sage loves toys that make things happen, toys with buttons, but will only really play with the buttons or the cause and effect that the toy was intended to have the right way, like 2 or 3 times, and then the toy is now an experiment, a scientific experimental object used for great experiments like how far can this thing go? Can anyone take this thing apart? What if they throw it down and jump on it? What sound does it make when it lands? How many, how can I get it to land on the couch from this far away? How about from this far away? Sage loves to make things happen. Sage loves water in every form. Um, Playing with water in the sink when they're supposed to be washing their hands, playing with water in the bathtub, playing with the hose outside, in situations where Sage is super bored and nobody is able to entertain them in any way, especially in the car, then Sage goes through a phase of spitting saliva into their own hands and playing with it in the absence of anything else to play with, which is, you know, undesired by their parents. Sage never, ever, 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 ever stops moving. Pretty much from the second that they wake up until the second that they go to sleep. And by go to sleep, I really mean collapse unconscious, because Sage also won't stop moving in bed, and is prone to popping back out of bed and getting up to play in the room or leaving the room to go find their parents. And it's really a struggle for their parents to figure out what to do with them, in that situation, and how to just get them to stop moving their body so that they can fall asleep. As Sage gets a little older and goes on to school, Sage really struggles um, to pay attention if there's something more interesting to look at. And in a kindergarten classroom, there's pretty much always something more interesting to look at. Sage will, before Sage can even read, Sage will be gazing intently at the posters on the wall because they're colorful, or any kind of movement that's happening at all in the room, whether that's a peer needed to go to the bathroom, or the class gerbil is making some noise. Sage will be looking at that instead of looking at the teacher. Sage touches everything, everywhere, always, which is how Sage accidentally unraveled half an inch of the rug during circle time before the teacher noticed what was going on. When they're walking in the hallway from one place to another place, everybody's supposed to have their hands by their side or behind their back, and Sage is running their hand along the wall and touching all of the artwork, and pulling on anybody's decorations and touching everybody's backpacks and keychains. And similarly to Alex, the teacher will be like, Sage, we're going to keep our hands to ourselves this time. We're going to keep our hands in a ducktail this time. And Sage will be like, yes, yes, yes. And then just as soon as they're walking, Sage is touching everything again. When Sage gets even a little older and they're supposed to, like, there's an expectation that the kids can sit at their desks and work on something, Sage will get up a million times to ask the teacher a million questions. Can I get a pencil? Can I sharpen my pencil? Can I go to the bathroom? Can I go get a drink of water? And by the time that the independent work time is done, Sage has, written maybe their name at the top and gotten to absolutely nothing else. As Sage gets older as a teenager and on into adulthood, Sage continues to just be this joyful, over the top, enthusiastic person. Um, they love thrills, they love adrenaline. They ask to go to an amusement park for their birthday, or are making plans to save up and go skydiving when they're an adult. Sage continues to be touchy feely and never really grew out of wanting like hugs and cuddles from their parents. Sage has younger siblings and is really happy to hug them, and like even in public. And their parents find it charming that even though their parents might not be very touchy feely people or tried to do better than their own parents for their kid. And it seems like it worked for Sage because Sage never seemed like they grew out of that phase of like wanting a hug or even wanting a kiss from their mom. And Sage's friends are all like kind of the same level of like physically playful with each other. They'll jump on each other's backs or give each other piggyback rides or that silly like teenage wrestling that teenagers do. Um, Sage was never great at any one particular sport, but enthusiastically tried like all of them. And Sage loves movement, especially, and running and jumping. And so, as a teenager, they kind of got into parkour or free running because they already liked to like climb stuff in urban environments and jump off of it. And so that gave them an excuse to do that in like a slightly structured way. In my experience, Sage's parents are the ones who have most likely to have contacted me because they're the ones who are the most likely to be like, help. um, this kid has so much energy. Or Sage's teachers. Um, and You might recognize elements of your child in Sage, you might recognize elements of yourself. Or you might be like, wait, parts of myself are like Sage, but parts of myself are like Alex or Sam, or parts of my child. And we will talk about all of the ways that these break down after I introduce you to the last of these four friends. This is Morgan. At 3, Morgan is um, a super, super content baby, a super, super content toddler. Morgan's parent Morgan is their first child that they had, and Morgan's parent was actually like kind of baffled by how good they were at independent play, like immediately, as in like step one, have a baby, step two, they play independently, like it's just that simple. And Morgan's parent would feel like almost like a little bit guilty about leaving the room to go like put the stuff from the washer into the dryer or make lunch or whatever. But Morgan did not seem bothered by being left in the playroom, within earshot, within easy like checking on distance. But like mom or dad could walk out of the room and like, okay, that's okay. Um, Morgan may not have even noticed they were playing with their own stuff. On the flip side, even the simplest direction, like Morgan, can you go get your shoes and then bring them back to me so that I can help you put them on? Unless parent follows Morgan all the way to the shoes, Morgan is probably going to be found later playing with something that was along the way to the shoes, or straight up playing with the shoelaces themselves, or somewhere having wandered off kind of in their own world, and something else become more interesting on the way to that. um, Morgan bumps into everything, and Morgan's parent actually took them to the doctor about it, thinking that maybe it had something to do with their vision, because like Morgan's lived in the same house their entire life, and they'll like fully run into the door frame, and like the door hasn't moved and the house hasn't moved, and nothing has changed in the last 3 years. And their vision was tested, their vision was said to be fine, and their pediatrician said like sometimes kids are just really clumsy. Um and it seems like they've always got like a bump on their head or something like that from having run fully into something. Morgan's at the playground. Morgan's parent, it took them a while to figure out what the common pattern was that Morgan would only play with like one thing at the playground. So they would go one day and Morgan would just be like totally happy to spend the whole time on the swings. And then another time they would only want to play on the slide. And eventually Morgan's parent realized that depending on what time of day they go, the sunshade that's over the playground is shading one part of the playground versus another. And that Morgan only wants to play in the shade. And as soon as Morgan's parents bought them a sun hat, all of a sudden the whole playground was magically accessible to them. But it took a lot of like studying and problem solving to even come to that conclusion. And then once they had that, they realized that it also applied to some of the struggles that they had whenever they were going anywhere in the car. And as soon as they bought a shade thing to go in the window, like one of those sort of see-through things, that would reduce the amount of sunlight that was just like Morgan squinting in the back seat, then that made a big difference in how well Morgan was able to ride in the car. As Morgan gets a little bit older, as Morgan goes to school, Morgan does not seem to notice that whole class directions apply to them. So if the teacher is like, hey, everybody get out your science notebooks, Morgan will just be like sitting there super happily until the teacher is like, Morgan, get out your science notebook. Almost as if they don't realize that they are part of everybody. Um, Morgan literally falls out of their chair onto the floor like 5 times throughout the day. And so their teacher, who has read a little bit about sensory processing, is like, aha, I will give them a wobble stool. And now Morgan falls out of their chair onto the floor like 19 times a day. And so Morgan's teacher is like, dang, that occupational therapist on the internet doesn't know what they're talking about. Um, Morgan is really good at math. It's like it's really one of their academic strengths. But Morgan will just leave like half of a worksheet blank, and they know the math like principle. They know how to do it. Um, but they won't even try like at all. So then their teacher takes the worksheet and like highlights the ones that they didn't do and gives it back to them, and then Morgan will do like half of them. And Morgan's teacher sometimes gets frustrated because it feels like Morgan's not applying themselves, or Morgan doesn't care about doing all of it. And tries to talk to them about it, tries to coach them about it. And it doesn't seem like it's making a difference. As Morgan gets a little bit older, and on into adulthood, Morgan is aware of themselves being uh, they when there's a conversation and they're a part of it, it feels like everybody else kind of moves at a little bit faster speed than they do. If the conversation topic shifts, Morgan's still kind of thinking about the thing that they had to contribute, but that was like a sentence ago, and now the topic is on to something else. Or if somebody tells a joke, Morgan feels like they're always the last one to laugh, and they've like noticed this about themselves. Um, Morgan continues to be really clumsy. There's like a running joke between them and their friends about how they always have a bruise that they don't know where it came from, and they can trip going up the stairs, and all of these kinds of things. Um, Also, it's very easy to startle Morgan without even trying to. Like somebody can literally just walk up to them and be like, "Hey, Morgan," and it was at a conversational volume, and nobody was sneaking in this, arrangement. But Morgan had no idea that they were there up until they said their name, and then it startled them. Um, Morgan super struggles to follow directions, like map directions. And totally relies on GPS to get anywhere when they learn how to drive, even places that they've been to like 20 times before. Um, when Morgan's school moved from the middle school to the high school, and had to navigate like a really big building and like the class number system, Morgan was showing up late to classes a bunch because they were confused about where to go in the halls, and like way past the time at which most of the other kids had figured it out with the new transition. So we've got 4 friends: Sam, Alex, Sage, and Morgan. And you might have heard elements of yourself in some of them. You might have heard all of yourself more represented in one of them more so than others. Any of these kids could have been an actual kid who I've worked with. The only reason why they are hypothetical is because they each fit entirely into one box. And in real life, usually people are a little bit more complicated than that. They don't, usually real people have, some elements of one and some elements of another. So whenever I am talking about these sensory processing styles that I'm about to explain, then I am talking about more than just five senses. You probably learned about five of them when you were in school, which would be vestibular, or sorry, nope, I launched into the bonus senses, which would be visual, sight, auditory, hearing, touch, sense, taste, and smell. And then there are three bonus senses on top of that. Your vestibular sense is your inner ear sense of balance and movement. That's the sense that's activated by things like spinning, swaying. That's what makes people dizzy when they go on a merry-go-round for a long time. That's what makes people get motion sick when they go in a car or on a boat. It's all related to your very sensitive vestibular sense. There's your sense of proprioception, which is how your brain makes a map of your body in space, and is like a sense that you feel with structures deeper in your body than your skin. Your sense of touch is skin deep, but your muscles and your joints create your sense of proprioception. And then lastly, there is interoception, not to be confused with introspection, which is what people tell me a lot, that they think that their kid needs to work on introspection, which they very well might, but also they might need to work on interoception, which is your inner body sense of making meaning out of the sensations that your body experiences. That one's a bit tricky to say because I could also say making sense of the senses that you sense, which would not be a very sensical English sentence. Making meaning out of the sensations that your body experiences, whether biological, like I am feeling kind of a rumbling sensation in my abdomen. I know that that means that I'm hungry. Or I'm feeling like this burning, pressing sensation, and I know that that means that I need to go to the toilet. Or emotional, like I am feeling that my hands are sweaty and I feel kind of queasy. That means that I know that I'm anxious. Or I am feeling, super light and bouncy and joyful. Joyful is not a physical sensation. I am feeling joyful. I am feeling happy and excited. Um, so we've got these eight senses, and then we're going to be kind of placing them on this map, which I realize is really visually overwhelming when you first look at it. So I'm going to describe it. And hopefully you can follow me here. So I've got two axes, one going from top to bottom and one going from left to right. Those are the gray lines on here on the slides, and the bottom of the line that goes top to bottom is low tolerance or a low threshold for sensory input. When I talk about tolerance and threshold, they are sometimes equivalent to each other, but they are sometimes different than each other. The threshold for a sensory input is the point at which you notice it at all. And the tolerance for sensory input is the point at which it bothers you. Sometimes the point at which you notice a sensory thing at all and the point at which it bothers you will be equivalent. There's probably no amount of scratching my nails on a chalkboard that you could notice before you would be bothered by it. They would be equivalent to one another. But sometimes they're different. There probably is some amount of listening to your favorite music that you could do before you would be bothered by it. But if I kept turning up and up and up and up and up and up the volume, at some point, I would probably hit a point where your body became physically uncomfortable with it because it was literally just too loud for you to be getting enjoyment out of it anymore. And that would be the difference between your threshold and your tolerance in that particular situation. A lot of times, people with low thresholds for things also have low tolerance for it, and people with high thresholds for things may have high tolerance for it, but those are not always exactly synonymous. So the map would technically have like another dimension, but I can't draw coming out of your screen and into you, so we'll just stick with the two-dimensional version for right now. So we've got the line that goes from a low tolerance or threshold to a high tolerance or threshold, and then we've got the other line that goes from passive to active. That's the horizontal line. Active, this refers to how people use strategies for getting their sensory needs met. So somebody with active strategies for getting their sensory needs met is somebody who's going to do a lot of actions that move toward or move away from sensory, input that they want and want more of, or don't want and want less of. On the other side of the map, with passive, um, I usually don't like the word passive. It's the word that was used by the person who invented this four quadrant model, which is Winnie Dunn, who's like a pioneer of OT. So I don't mean any shade on Winnie Dunn personally, but I don't love the word passive because it gets interpreted by people usually to mean like, well, this kid's just sitting around and let life happen to them and like lazy, and that's not what it means at all. um it usually means somebody who uses environmental strategies to manage the sensory input the way that they like it or the way that they don't like it. Environmental strategies as in I like to just set up the environment and then let the environment kind of be comfortable for me or keep things comfortable for me. And a lot of times there is also kind of a difference along the passive to active strategies line. There's also a difference in how much autonomy adults have over their own life versus how much autonomy kids have over their own life. And so a lot of times what looks like active strategies for getting your needs met is really just I am an adult and now there is no one to tell me that I am not allowed to get my needs met in this way. But children might be in situations more frequently where the thing that they are doing to try to get their needs met is getting them in trouble or isn't, actually a good idea for some other reason that the kid didn't know about because the adults know more about that stuff than the kids might. And so kids might overall look a little bit more passive or a little bit more relying on environmental strategies than the adults are kind of across the lifespan. So if I go back to my four friends and we try to figure out where to place them on this map, where to understand them and what they represent, and you think in your head about who has a high tolerance for lots and lots and lots and lots of sensory input and is also very active about getting their own needs met. If you think about Sam, Alex, Sage, and Morgan, then you might come up with the fact that Sage is the one who is at the top right quadrant, the sensory seeker quadrant. Or in the little like cute illustration that was made by Doing Therapy that I love and always include in this, of the mugs that's out to the right. That's also the top right one, and it says tall mug. Underneath it, it says big cup, let's fill it up. Thrives in sensory rich settings. Steals your pen, clicks your pen, breaks your pen, dismantles your pen. That would be somebody who is has a high tolerance for sensory input and is active about getting their needs met. Over and over and over, we heard how Sage would make the noise that they wanted to hear, play the way that they wanted to play, loved really sensory rich play, like playing in water, making noise, making things happen in movement all of the time. And so all of the different sensory components that I just mentioned, hearing, sight, taste, tell, smell, touch, movement, balance, and interoception. Sage wants more and more and more of all of those. Seems like they have an endlessly big cup that they can keep pouring sensory input into, and it never hits the threshold. It never overflows because or it never hits the tolerance. I'm sorry. It never gets to the point at which it bothers them. They can just keep pouring more and more and more, and it doesn't bother them. So if you think about somebody else who we talked about who is active about getting their needs met, but opposite of Sage has a very low threshold for what they notice and a very low tolerance for what bothers them, then that would be Alex. Alex was bothered by standing in line next to other kids, felt like they were pushing and shoving. And the solution, the active strategy that Alex came up with was, well, if I'm the line leader, there's only one direction that people can push and jostle me from. Um, and the strategy that Alex came up with to manage that is if I cry and whine at the teacher long enough, maybe they will let me always be the line leader. Um, that's like two steps removed from the direct sensory problem of um, being aware that other kids jostling Alex is bothering their nervous system. And so their sense of touch is feeling overwhelmed. And so they're coming up with an active strategy to try to manage that. And I'm not saying I'm not saying active strategy as if Alex like sat down with a strategic journal and decided, okay, yes, the best strategy that I've worked out here is to cry and whine at my teacher. I'm saying that all of this happens on an instinctive level. When Alex was a kid, when Alex was a baby, they liked knowing how the day would be so that their brain could begin preparing for it. They could begin avoiding anything that they didn't want. Um, and they could begin preparing for what the day would be like with these active strategies. Alex was always making noise to themselves because it covers up any noise that is bothering them in the environment. Alex is coming up with these active ways to manage their life. That are going to help them actively avoid the things that the sensory input that would be overwhelming to them. The description on the little teacups illustration is called Little Teacup and says, small cup says when pretty fast, loves routine, insightful about own needs, and shh. Those are the descriptors for a sensory avoider. So we've got a sensory seeker and a sensory avoider. We're going to cross from the active strategy side of the map into the passive strategy side of the map and talk about who might be similar to Alex in some ways, a low tolerance and low threshold, but with more environmental strategies or more passive strategies. That would be sensory sensitive Sam. Sensory sensitive Sam, who really struggled with the texture of food in their mouth, the tactile, the touch sensation of having their nails clipped, having their hair washed, the auditory sensation of having loud noises, was occupying so much of their brain that they couldn't even go play in the backyard because their brain was so focused on being alert for the problem of what if a dog barks? What if I have to handle the auditory input of a dog barking? Um, and the description on the little mugs illustration is called small hand built mug. It says little cup, prone to overflow, notices everything, can feel the tag in a shirt while someone else is wearing it. Um, a lot of times in real life, it is not super duper important to make clear distinctions between whether somebody is a sensory avoider or sensory sensitive, and those can be the two hardest to kind of tell the differences between. Um, and like I said before, people don't just fit neatly into boxes, so it's not like you have to know exactly which box for exactly which thing because like if you're sensory sensitive then you are, and if you're sensory avoidant then you are, and these are all just language used to describe how people are. They're not like universal truths of the universe or whatever. But if people are interested in what the difference between sensory sensitive and sensory avoider is, a lot of times the difference is most easily apparent in super super early childhood, like one or a baby or before you can talk. A lot of times somebody who is sensory sensitive, a child who is primarily sensory sensitive will look sensitive, like the word sensitive just like naturally fits here. And a lot of times a kid who is sensory avoidant primarily will look particular, which is a word that gets used almost only for babies or toddlers. Because it refers to somebody who we don't think ought to really have the autonomy to think that they know how things should be, like a baby. um Somebody a kid who is sensory sensitive might just have kind of this like crying overwhelmed vibe of everything is wrong and I don't know why, whereas a sensory avoidant little kid might have this vibe of like, I know I can't talk yet, but if we would all just listen to me around here, like things would be going a lot smoother. I could actually probably run this household better than you can. Um, and The differences in terms of strategies is that active strategies for being able to get your needs met for the avoider, a child will usually follow an instinct that they don't even, it's not conscious awareness, it's not conscious decision to just be defiant or not listen to what you're saying or whatever it is. It's them instinctually responding to their body telling them things would feel better if I, whatever goes in the blank there, versus a sensory sensitive kid who is relying more on passive or environmental strategies to help keep getting their needs met. Um, Passive or environmental strategies when you're a kid means what your adult sets up for you. Like that's what environment you've got is what your adult sets up for you. And so they're really relying on some help with coming up with strategies that are going to help get their needs met. And they might seem really overwhelmed, really helpless, really not sure how to do anything to help themselves with the overwhelm that they're feeling. And so they might just seem really sensitive, like they melt down a lot, like it comes out of nowhere. So that leaves us with the last space on our map, the sensory missers. The actual word for this in Winnie Dunn's model is called low registration. But I feel like I like sensory missers because it fits the model of everybody being a sensory something, and because nobody ever knows what low registration means. So sensory missers, ironically, are usually the most likely to get missed themselves, although that's not why they're called sensory missers. They're called sensory missers because they're missing more sensory input than everybody else is. But they're also the most likely to get missed themselves in terms of like if they're struggling with something, if something is bothering them, whether sensory or something else like social or academic or whatever. Because a lot of times sensory missers will kind of look content. Um, as a baby, they might kind of look content. As a kid, they might have kind of learned that as long as they prioritize like sitting and being quiet and staring off happily into space and daydreaming, then nobody's going to like be upset with them the way that the teacher might be upset with the sage in the classroom because you know they're bouncing off the walls and tearing stuff down and unraveling stuff. And if the sensory mister just sits there and be quiet, then maybe nobody will be upset with them, even if they're not actually picking up on whatever it is that the lesson is about. Um, excuse me for a minute. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold here because, again, winter. Um, the description on the mug illustration says big chill vessel, big cup, can't be bothered filling it, easily overlooks sensory info, good at focusing, and where did that bruise come from? Um, a sensory misser is more likely to miss sensory input than others are. Somebody calling their name, something that they were supposed to be visually focused on. Morgan was constantly trying to work on the worksheet, visually missed half the questions on there. It wasn't that Morgan didn't care. It wasn't that Morgan was just lazy and didn't want to put in the effort. Morgan did not visually see that there were other problems on a busy worksheet, because once they had filled out some of them, then when they were looking at it, their eyes were like glancing over the unfilled ones because now there are pencil marks all over the page. And so it's busy. It's hard to tell at a glance which ones I already did and which ones I didn't. I think I've just done them all. Morgan was, wouldn't even notice when their parent left the room because they were so interested in the thing that they were playing that as long as their parent left quietly, they were just going to keep playing with the thing that they were playing and not notice that that their parent had stepped out. Give me 1 second to drink some water and cough. Sorry about that. Um, Morgan is someone who has a high tolerance for sensory input. It's not bothering them, but also has a high threshold. Um, they might not even be noticing it. Whereas Sage could have a high threshold, definitely has a high tolerance. This is where I said that having more, dimensions on the map might be helpful. Sensory seeker may or may not have a high threshold. They might be noticing everything and they just love it, pouring more and more and more into the cup, and they just love it. That's fine with them. They would love to notice every little thing and pour it into the cup. Morgan is missing it. That's the primary difference between those two. Is that if stuff did not rise to Morgan's level of awareness, then it did not even go into their conscious brain. All brains are always filtering out things that we don't need to think about. And a lot of sensory info is part of that. We don't, until I say it, you're probably not thinking deeply about exactly what the room you're in smells like, or you're probably not thinking deeply about exactly what the chair feels like underneath your bottom, or things like that. They're not rising to a high level of your conscious awareness because your brain already classified those things, determined that there was nothing in it that was going to hurt you or noteworthy or needed, commentary, and filed them in a part of your brain that's not currently in your conscious awareness because you're listening to me talk. Um, Morgan's brain is doing the same thing. It's just doing it for more info than other people's are. And it might be catching things in there that people don't believe should be filtered out. Like their teacher might not believe that their lecturing voice talking about the thing that they're supposed to learn about ought to be filtered out, or their parent might not believe that them calling Morgan's name because they need to leave to go to whatever should be filtered out. And Morgan's not making a conscious decision of my parents are unimportant and I don't care about them, so I won't listen to them. Their brain is just filtering it out before it even gets to the them that is conscious Morgan. And so sensory missers, I have a soft spot for them because they get missed in the talks about sensory stuff, and they get missed themselves in terms of what support they need, because they rely on environmental strategies to help them be able to have their sensory awareness, have things happening at a level that rises to the level of their sensory awareness. So it is important to remember that real life is more complicated than this. I've said that a couple of times. People don't always fit neatly into boxes, and there might be different reasons why people fit into different boxes. One reason might be that people have different boxes for different senses. So somebody might say, I'm a real sensory seeker for movement, but I'm really sensory avoidant for noise. Or I'm really sensory missing for noise. Um, so I love moving. I actively try to seek out movement. But when it comes to noise, it's like I don't even hear what somebody else is saying. I don't hear, somebody calling my name. And when I'm focused on something, nothing can distract me. But I'm moving the whole time that I'm focused on something. I'm not like sitting down at my desk. I'm like standing beside it and spinning and twirling around and, walking around and pacing. But I'm completely focused. I'm not actually distracted, even if it looks like I'm distracted. Somebody might fit in different boxes at different times of day, and usually this commonly follows a pattern. I'm going to go back a slide for just a second. This usually commonly follows a pattern where you have higher tolerance in the morning, and then it slides down during the day. So somebody who's primarily a sensory misser might slide into being sensitive throughout the day, and somebody who's primarily a seeker might slide into being avoidant throughout the day. Especially if this was actually like a mathematical graph that you could plot yourself somewhere on, which it's not, but if it was, if you think that the place that you would plot yourself is kind of close-ish to the line, then it's like as you go through the day, as you get tapped out, as your resources get used, as your brain gets more tired, you kind of slide from your spot above close to the horizontal line to just below, close to the horizontal line. Um, uh, like I mentioned a couple of times, tolerance and threshold may not be the same. You might have a high threshold for noticing input, but a low tolerance for tolerating it. An example of this is my own son has a really high threshold for noticing that he is wet or cold. So tactile input, temperature is part of tactile. So he will play in a mud puddle, or when we moved, so we live in Australia. And when we went to the beach for the first time, I didn't think anybody would be interested. My kids really hadn't seen a beach. And so I just wanted to like go look at it, but it was freezing outside. I didn't think anybody would want to go in the water, but he did. He wanted to wade into the water fully clothed, fully wearing his, tennis shoes. And I was okay with that. I wasn't super prepared for it. I didn't really have like a change of clothes and towels and stuff. But I was okay with it. And so he went and just like stood in the water, and it was going up over his clothes, and his pants were getting wet, and he was super happy with that. And then all of a sudden a switch flips once it passes that threshold for noticing. And he goes, oh no, I'm uncomfortable. And then it's like, well, I'm gonna take all my clothes off on the beach and I don't even care. Like, it is time to be done being cold and wet this millisecond, because once it passed the threshold for me to notice it, it also blew. It was already long way past the tolerance for tolerating it. It's just that I wasn't noticing it before, so my tolerance wasn't tapped out. It's like a time bomb. It's like it's counting down to, as soon as he notices he's cold, it's naked time. And you don't want that on the beach when you don't have a towel. Um so it's something that we have to, prepare for in situations where we might get cold or wet. There have been times in the past where it's looked like I just am the super mean mom who won't have fun and let their kid play in a mud puddle, and it's because I know that that will mean we will not wear shoes for the rest of the day rather than have a shoe be slightly wet as soon as he clocks into it, but he hasn't realized that cause and effect is what's going to happen. um like I also touched on briefly, my fourth reason for why people don't fit neatly into boxes is that I don't have like literature to back this up, but I see a shift from passive to active across the lifespan that I feel is better reflected by the description that adults have more autonomy to set up their lives the way that they want to and to actively manage their lives the way that they want to. Um, and so there's a little bit of a autonomy shift across the lifespan in terms of what you can do for yourself, and what that looks like is a shift from the passive strategy side of the map to a shift to the active strategy side of the map. However, in all of this description of how people don't fit neatly into boxes, and even with the caveat that there tends to be a slide from passive to active across the lifespan, an important element of this is that people's sensory processing styles don't go away. Nothing about this is me being like, and so I'm an occupational therapist, and if your kid was working with me, I would make them stop having a sensory, whatever that means. Nothing about what I do is like that. Nothing about knowing your sensory profile or your sensory processing style is bad or means you have a diagnosis or means that you're dysfunctional. Nothing like that. People's people, everybody in the world has a way that they process sensory information, because you take in sensory information and your brain processes it like a computer processes something. That's not a bad thing, and it doesn't mean that any other thing. It doesn't mean that you're autistic or ADHD or neurodivergent in any way. It means that you process sensory information because you're human. Um, and the way that you process sensory information tends to stay the same, roughly the same big categories, even if not same exact tiny little, pinpoints of data across the lifespan. Sam's sensory profile stayed constant. They stayed sensitive to noises their whole life. The vacuum, the blender, the dog as a toddler, the fire drill or somebody dropping a book as a child, and even just somebody saying their name when they weren't expecting it or unexpectedly shouting at them as an adolescent, as an adult. Sam stayed sensitive to touch, sensitive to hygiene and grooming tasks as a toddler, sensitive to injuries on the playground, and sensitive to unexpected touch as a child. That goes all the way back to the story at the very beginning of this where Sam shoved a kid. Affectionate touch as an adolescent, even with the logical knowledge that affectionate touch is affectionate, that whoever's rubbing their shoulder wants to communicate care and concern. It still felt not good to them. That doesn't mean that they, punch them in the face, because they're not a toddler anymore with toddler impulses. But it might even make them feel internally aggressive, like, stop touching me, even though they don't react that way outwardly now because they have an adolescence or an adult's impulse control and problem solving skills. Sensitive to foods, sensitive to pretty much all foods as a toddler, as their palate was still growing and developing and trying to figure out what stuff tastes good, what stuff is okay, what textures are okay. School lunch as a child, specific textures as an adult. They've been able to narrow it down to know what will bother them, but their sensory profile didn't change. This is important for lots of reasons, but it's something that I always share in my presentations every time that I ever talk about sensory processing stuff, because specifically of the history of my field of occupational therapy. Having for a long time in the history of the job of occupational therapy, having for a long time this element of believing that we could desensitize people to sensations that they found distressing. So, like, for example, somebody comes to occupational therapy, they bring their kid, and they're like, every time that they touch like a goopy texture, then they gag and throw up and cry. And the OT being like, okay, well, obviously in your life, then at some point you're going to need to touch goopy textures. So, what we're going to do is play with shaving cream and make you touch it and make sure you don't have a towel and you can't wipe it off and require you to touch it before you're allowed to do anything else. And at the end of, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks of doing that, then your kid won't be gagging and throwing up anymore. And that means that we, fixed it. We desensitized them to it. Well, how do we know that we desensitize them to it? Well, because when we look at them, they're not gagging and throwing up anymore. But that doesn't tell us anything about what's going on inside of the child's brain or inside of the child's body. That doesn't tell us if the child has learned to dissociate from the setting that they're in order to cope with the horrific texture that they're being forced to touch. That doesn't tell us if the child is suppressing all of the sensory discomfort that they feel until sometime later in the day when they have a meltdown about nothing or for no reason at all. And their parent doesn't put two and two together to know that it's because they've been suppressing these distressed emotions until later. We don't know if inside their head, if they're going like, if I keep gagging and throwing up, then they're going to keep forcing me to do this. So I have to squash this. I have to not let this show. But all of the distress is still inside me. But I have to not let it show because my adults are making it very clear to me that as long as I let it show, I'm not safe. As long as I show my distress, then adults will keep distressing me on purpose. And that was my field, not my practice, because it was before I was a practitioner, but it is in the history of my field. And so there's never any time when I can talk about sensory processing stuff without very clearly, probably too clearly, harping on the fact that people's sensory processing styles don't go away. And you cannot choose for somebody else that you're going to desensitize their body to the way that it experiences a sensation that is not your body and not something that you are experiencing. And there is a level of sensory input that would make your body feel the same way that they're feeling. It's just that yours might be different than theirs. So there is a level of noise at which somebody could blast, uncomfortable, horrible noise at you that would make you cover your ears and fall to the ground and scream, or try to run away from the place that you were in, or try to, punch the person who was keeping you there by force and hurting you and hurting your body with things that were making you uncomfortable. It's just that that's not the supermarket or the car, and so it doesn't register that way to you. But that doesn't mean that your body wouldn't react that way in a different setting, in a different situation, because it's just the way that their body is processing that. Now, people can decide that they want to temporarily put up with a sensory thing that's bothering them for the sake of something else that they feel is worth, the give and take. I'm a really, 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 really sensory avoidant person. And I hate dry sand. I hate the texture of dry sand. But I still go to the beach because I think that I get things out of that are worth it for me to still be worth, trying to go, as opposed to just avoiding sand forever, which would also be fine. But I like the beach. And so I can do this kind of give and take where I know that I can like accommodate myself in some ways. After I have been in dry sand, I will not be wearing any shoes anymore at all until I can take a shower. And the shower needs to be like at home in my shower, not like a beach shower, because those are full of sand. And so after that, I will be driving home barefoot. I need to not have any other errands that I need to run, not even flip-flops. Can't handle the grains of sand being in between my foot and in between something else. If I'm going to get dry sand like on my clothes or like on me, then I need a change of clothes. But if it's just my feet, then as long as I don't have to wear shoes on my feet, I can be okay. Or if I'm in a OT session with a kid and they want to play with the sandbox and they want me to play alongside them, I can do that because I'm an adult and I know the next time I'll be able to wash my hands, and I know that it's worth building the rapport with this child or whatever it is. None of that is because I'm desensitized to it. I am having a gross time the whole time that I'm touching the dry sand, but I know when I will have relief, and I know, the amount of distress that it causes me is not like an immediate meltdown level of distress. It's like like a whatever 10%, 20% increase in physical discomfort. And so if I'm not at 90% stressed, then I can handle a 10% increase in physical discomfort because I know when I'll be able to, decrease it again by washing my hands. Um, if I was 2, I wouldn't know all of that. If I was 8, I wouldn't know all of that in my own self, in my own history. An 8-year-old can know that if they've got parents who are supporting them in learning about their body and the way that it processes and things like that. I didn't have that when I was a kid. Most of us didn't. But when you're 2, you got no chance to know that really. You can't barely even conceptualize time or the future. So like there will be a time at which your body is not physically uncomfortable. It's not really even if a really verbal 2-year-old can like repeat that to you, they can't understand time until they're a little bit older. And so I can decide on my own behalf that I want to try new things, or I want to try, or that even if I'm not going to like the thing, that it's worth some kind of a trade-off for me. But I can't decide on behalf of somebody else that they won't be distressed anymore if I just keep desensitizing them to this. Usually when I share this, somebody asks me, what about exposure therapy? Which is a really great question. And exposure therapy is a psychological therapy, not an OT thing. It's in the field of psychology, not in the field of occupational therapy. And it is for phobias or anxiety, strategically exposing yourself to elements of the thing that you have a phobia of. Like, I have a phobia, not a hypothetical person has a phobia of elevators. And so, with the psychologist on board and directing treatment, they read a Wikipedia article about elevators, and then they print out pictures of elevators and look at them, and then one day they go stand near an elevator, and then one day they go stand in an elevator, and then they ride the elevator up to the second floor, like strategic exposure to it. That is not the same thing as trying to desensitize somebody's sensory system. Trying to target a phobia or an anxiety is not the same thing as their system. And so with a trained psychologist doing trained psychology, excellent. That is a great thing for psychology and a great thing for phobias. But somebody who is having a sensory aversion to something is not having a phobia of it. It is rooted in the sensory nervous system part of their body that is a different thing than phobias and anxiety. So that type of sensory desensitization does not exposure therapy for anxieties and phobias. So going back to the two I introduced, or the children who I introduced at the beginning of this presentation, Alex sings in class during silent work time. The teacher reminds Alex of the rules. Alex can look them in the eyes and promise that they're going to follow the rules, and then Alex goes back to working, and then Alex goes back to singing. Is this a behavior, or is this a childish attempt to meet a sensory need? Alex is actively trying, because they have active strategies, actively trying to avoid auditory input. There could be a noise in the room that is bothering them, or it could just be the general amount of noise that comes anytime you try to pack 25 kids into a room. I had a student who I worked with who was a sensory avoider, and they could hear the electricity in outlets. So when they were seated next to a wall outlet in their desk, they could hear like a really high-pitched whining noise coming from the outlet. And they didn't know that that was unusual. They didn't know that most people don't hear outlets. The outlet was not auditory to me. I could not hear anything from the outlet, and neither could the teacher or any of the other kids. But the kid didn't know that. This took quite a lot of problem solving. The kid just assumed it was like everybody can hear the fan. Everybody can hear the music, so everybody can hear the outlet, and everybody else is just better at handling this than me. And first of all, the kid wasn't even consciously aware that that was what they were hearing. And it was like such an annoying, irritating noise to them. And their primary strategy for dealing with that was to get out of the room because their seat was next to the outlet. And but they it wasn't like they knew all of this consciously. It wasn't like they were like, I hear outlets, I'm seated next to an outlet, I want to get away from it, therefore I will get up and ask my teacher if I can go to the water fountain for the 95th time in the classroom. It wasn't like it was like a reasoned strategy. It was like an instinctual, I have to get out of here, I have to get out of here. I know that they won't allow me to just go running out for no reason. So how about I keep coming up with reasons, keep coming up with reasons. And even the describing I'm doing right now is making it sound more conscious than it actually is. This is all on like an unconscious level a lot of times with kids. And so the teacher just asked me, you know, the kid in my classroom leaves the room 400 times a day, and I can't, like, I obviously he's not learning anything. And I went in with the theory that the kid was like Sage, that the kid was a sensory seeker who wanted lots of movement, because classrooms tend to be kind of boring sometimes when you get into older. He was an older kid. When you get into older classrooms and you're just kind of sitting there the whole day and you're just working on your work. And so I went in with the theory that this kid might be a Sage, and instead I found out that this kid was an Alex, and that they were avoiding the auditory input of hearing the they were sitting next to. So we got him a seat further away from an outlet and some headphones, and that helped a long way in supporting them. It didn't solve everything magically overnight, but it helped a long way in supporting them. Alex is doing a childish attempt to meet a sensory need. That doesn't mean that the solution that they've picked is literally the only one in the world and that we all just have to cave to whatever it is that they think. It means that we can go, okay, if you're childishly trying to meet this need, then I know a different way to meet this need. So I can give you a different solution for meeting this need, and we're working together as a team on this. Sage is bouncing off the walls, knocking everything over, annoying everyone in their family. Is this a behavior or is it a childish attempt to meet a sensory need? This is the one I thought I was getting into with the kid who kept leaving the classroom. This is a active attempt to get movement, to get proprioceptive input, a childish attempt to get these. And so an adult can say, I know a non-childish, a non-immature way that we can get these that doesn't involve kicking your brother and knocking over a lamp and breaking everything. We can go outside, we can get a trampoline, we can do a Danny Go video, we can do something that involves movement and getting this input that you need. I can wrestle with you, all of these types of things. Sam shoves another kid to the ground at the park. Sam was playing in the sandbox. Another kid walked up, put their hand on Sam's shoulder, and then asked, "What's that?" And then Sam shoved them to the ground because a childish attempt to meet a sensory need. Sam was defending against tactile input that startled them. Even as an adult, Sam feels startled by touch input, feels gross, cringy, aggressive, feels like it bothers them in their body. The same way that it would if somebody was, in public sharing space with you and just shoved you. That would feel aggressive. And so against an aggressive feeling input, Sam reacted to defend themselves. But because the other child wasn't doing something that was intended to be aggressive and wasn't typically perceived by society as aggressive, to put your hand on somebody else's shoulder, then Sam overreacted because Sam was doing it in a childish and instinctive and immediate way without any logic or reason involved in that. Sam reacted to defend themselves against something that didn't need defending against, and that's what the part of it is that's a problem. And so if Sam's parent knows that this happens frequently, they might be able to stay closer to Sam so that Sam's got a little bit more of a protective bubble by the fact that, virtue of an adult being close by. They might be able to teach Sam what's going on in their body, and how to repair when something like this happens, but also that they're not a bad kid, that what's going on in their body is that it felt like an attack, and that as Sam gets a little bit older, they'll be able to advocate for themselves, be able to say, like, I would like a little bit of space, but you can play with me, or, whatever it is, and know that they're not actually under attack. So when people talk about behavior, I got to address the word behavior. I've been using it throughout this. When people talk about behavior, they're usually using it as a euphemism. They're usually using it to talk about negative behavior or attention-seeking behavior or inconvenient behavior or misbehavior or bad behavior. but all of that is kind of wrapped up in the shorthand word behavior, even though the word behavior technically is supposed to be value neutral. It just means doing stuff, behaving away anyway. But nobody is ever like, hey, we need to have a meeting to talk about your child's behavior. And then you get there and they're like, they're lovely and they're kind to everyone in class and they're great at sharing their toys. No, because when somebody says behavior, they mean it as a euphemism for misbehavior. But we could take this and shift it a little bit. We know you might have heard somebody say the phrase behavior is communication if this isn't like your first day to the internet. It gets thrown around a lot and it is useful for many discussions. It's a useful starting place. Behavior is early self-advocacy, because before a kid can even reflect on it takes a lot of metacognition. Metacognition meaning thinking about thinking. It takes a lot of metacognition to be able to reflect back on why you did something, turn that into language, and then explain verbally why you did that thing. That takes so many brain processes. A 3-year-old does not have those brain processes. A 5-year-old may not have like my 6-year-old is currently emerging into sort of having those brain processes. That still doesn't mean that they're perfect or good at it in emotional situations. But 3-year-olds are such baffling creatures that it's really hard not to constantly ask them why they're doing things. So remembering that behavior is early self-advocacy before a child can ever explain why they did something. We can watch their behavior for clues about why they did it, because it might self-advocate better than they can even voluntarily, verbally self-advocate yet. Behavior is perceived differently depending on the adult's lens, depending on how tired the adult is that day, whether they've had coffee in the morning yet, how hard the commute was to work, whether they're currently annoyed at their boss, whether they just got a bad email. Then the adult might perceive the child's behavior differently based on any of those things, or how much they know the kid, how much support they've given to the kid before, how old the kid is, how old they think the kid is, how large the kid is, what color the kid's skin is. All of these things have an effect on how the adult perceives what the behavior means. And so we have to remember that behavior might mean any one of a dozen different things. It might not mean the thing that we assume that it's meaning as our like knee-jerk reaction. So if you picture feeding like a 9-month-old baby, and I use a little baby as an illustration because it's pretty hard to accuse like a little baby of being like super manipulative or like defiant or like all the kinds of things that get tied up as soon as you're like 1.5. So if you think of like a 9-month-old baby, just to be clear about the statement I just said, I do not mean that you are manipulative as soon as you're 1.5. I mean that people think you are. If you think of a baby and you're like trying to feed them, you're trying to spoon feed them in their high chair, and they keep turning their head away. That could mean a dozen different things. That could mean, I am still eating the bite that you just gave me. Give me a second. I'm processing it. It's in my mouth. That could mean, I'm still thinking about the flavor of this and I'm not actually sure if I want another spoonful. That could mean, the dog just walked by and I was watching him because that was more interesting. That could mean, I wish you would let me hold the spoon. It could mean a dozen different things. And so whatever your knee-jerk, belief is, may or may not be right. But adults are usually more willing to be patient with a 9-month-old. It would be surprising for an adult to be like, just eat the food, because most of us would feel like that was a real overreaction to a 9-month-old baby. So the adult might be more willing to slow down, be curious, look around, be like, oh, you did just see the dog walk by. Okay, I see why you were distracted. Like, because we've got more patience, more tolerance for that with a baby. But a 5-year-old doing something, or a 10-year-old doing something, or a 15-year-old doing something, we have a harder time keeping that level of patience, and remembering that the behavior might mean different things and that we might interpret it different ways based on our own lens, based on what's going on for us. So sometimes when I share this type of information, I get accused of thinking that literally everything in the entire world is for sensory reasons and that there's no other reasons why anybody does anything ever forever. And I am fully aware that not every reason in the entire world is a sensory reason. There are social reasons why people do things, emotional reasons why people do things, maturity related reasons like development, child development reasons why people do things. missing information, like the child might not understand why something is a problem or why something would even affect you or you would even care about it to correct them because they weren't thinking about how it impacted on somebody else. They were just thinking about what it meant for themselves. Not every reason is a sensory reason, but I do know that the younger that a kid is, the more likely the thing that they are doing is a sensory reason. Because I've got this pyramid of learning here. This particular illustration is from a website called PlaySpark, but the illustration was actually written in 1991 by Taylor and Trott. You are born at the purple stripe at the bottom of the pyramid. The purple stripe says central nervous system. You're born with a nervous system. And from there, the other things build on top of the nervous system. Like when you're born, your senses are all blended. You're like smell and sounds and, touch and tastes and stuff because your brain has not even differentiated those different paths to make sense of all of it yet. It starts doing it really, really fast. It's like, babies can't even see for like the first couple of weeks because, or not can't even see like at all, but like can't see further than just a little ways away because their eyes haven't ever had anything to look at before. Their nerves have not had any, their ocular nerve that goes to their eye hasn't had anything to build on because it's just been dark. So it can't start building sight information until you're born and you start experiencing sight information. You start processing it. You start organizing it. Your brain starts putting those neurons in a particular pathway and puts that into a category, and that category is sight, and the sight things start taking up the sight part of the brain. So the stuff in the blue stripe is all senses. Olfactory means smell. Visual means sight. Auditory means hearing. Gustatory means taste. Interoception, like I talked about earlier. Tactile means touch. Vestibular and proprioception. Your brain starts building all of those things, building pathways for all of those things. And the younger you are, the more likely it is that your brain is still working on filling in information in those so that you have like a solid base on which to build all the other stuff. So if you're talking to me about a young kid, the odds that something that they're doing is for a sensory reason are higher because that's still the level of like building construction that their brain is in. They're still doing a lot of stuff for sensory reasons because their sensory systems are still being figured out. And then it keeps building on top of this, but that doesn't mean that other people can't do things for sensory reasons either. Older people can't do things for sensory reasons. They still can. You can still be filling in gaps. There can still be sensory experiences that you haven't had. An adult, there are still sensory experiences that I haven't had. I'm still trying new tastes. I'm still, like experiencing new types of movement and things like that. And so my brain is still categorizing those things, and I might still be doing those types of things because of a sensory reason. When you are trying to be a behavior detective, when you are trying to, we've already accepted that there might be more than one reason why your kid is doing things, and that your knee-jerk reaction might say more about you than it says about your kid. And so you're trying to be more aware. And so when you are trying to be a behavior detective, this is a really quick shorthand for being able to do that. Literally just asking yourself the question, does what the kid is doing cause there to be more of one of the senses? Does what the kid is doing cause there to be less of one of the senses? That's fairly simple to remember. It still might not be right because just like I said, if behavior might be for a dozen different reasons, or a dozen different explanations, and not every reason is a sensory reason, then you might go through this exercise and you might still not be, that might not feel like that's the right one or like that's probably the most probable one. But you can still practice it to just practice paying attention to what sensory reasons might be behind something that somebody is doing. Does this cause there to be more to look at, more to hear, more to smell, more to taste, more to touch, and so on? Or does this cause there to be less of any of those things? That might give you a clue about why the child is doing what they're doing, especially if what they're doing seems baffling. Think about the things that you do in your day-to-day life for sensory reasons, and whether or not the kids who you parent or the kids who you work with have the same privilege. Adults do a zillion things to preemptively meet their sensory needs throughout the day, to feel good strategies, to just keep themselves feeling good. And I say adults do a zillion of these things because I know that you do, because you don't wake up in the morning, pick your least favorite mug from the cupboard and the coffee brand that you like the least and the spoon that you feel like is exactly the wrong size and make yourself a cup of coffee that tastes a little bit bad and drive yourself to work in silence when you would rather listen to music and park in the parking space that's the furthest away from the door and walk in the way that's most uncomfortable for your body into the building and sit in the office chair that you like the least so that you can have a meeting. No, you don't do any of those things. You pick the things that you like the best. You pick the things that keep you feeling good. And most of those things, many of those things, are sensory things. You pick the flavor that you like the best. You pick the texture that you like the best. You pick the temperature that you like the best. You pick the sound that you like the best. You turn the lights on the way that you like them the best. You preemptively keep meeting your needs throughout the day. When kids do the exact same thing, a lot of times they do it in childish ways because they are children and they are meeting they're making an attempt to meet their need in a childish way. And if it's childish, then it might be inconvenient or it might be foolish or it might be not well thought out. And they do the same things that adults do, but in childish ways. And they're so instead of the adult coming alongside them to work with them as a team about how to do it, the adult just tells them that they really shouldn't be doing that. If an adult picks their favorite mug out of the cupboard in order to have their coffee in the morning, then that's fine. And even if the adult's mug isn't clean, so they rinse it out or they get it out of the dishwasher, then that's fine. But if the kid, cries on the ground because the green cup wasn't available and they really wanted it, then that's not fine. Even though those are literally the exact same thing. One of them is just a childish way of doing it. Adults do preemptive things to meet their needs throughout the day. We stand up and stretch or walk around when we need to move. We jiggle our leg or twirl a pen or chew gum when we need to fidget. We go to the bathroom when we need to, or at least make arrangements for when we're going to need to go to the bathroom when we next need to. I know that if you're like a teacher, you can't just like leave your class, but we make arrangements to go to the bathroom. We eat a snack when we're hungry. We put down a task that is frustrating to us and we take a break. It's very rare that there's somebody standing over us being like, you cannot take a break. You cannot. If you do, you will be in personal physical trouble with me right now. It's very rare that we're in situations like that. We can usually text a friend or joke with a coworker or rant or vent about something that's stressing us out, and we're allowed to look angry and grumpy about it without somebody policing the way that our face looks or the way that we're emoting. We can usually adjust the sensory demands of our environment. We can usually put on music or turn it off, turn down lights or turn them up. We can usually daydream or doodle or look like we're not paying attention, again, without usually somebody standing over us being like, you're not paying attention, you're about to be in trouble because you're not paying attention to me. We can usually choose to keep like treats on hand to give ourselves a reward or motivate ourselves when we want to, and we're in charge of our own ones. We don't have to rely on whether or not somebody else will let us have it. And many, if not all of these things are at least policed in children, if not used as a reward or banned or not allowed. At very least for kids, they're usually behind the paywall, so to speak, of an adult that they have to convince that they deserve that thing, if not just disallowed. And a shorthand for figuring out feel good strategies, if you feel like I don't actually know what makes me feel good and what makes me feel bad, I don't have a good connection to that in my body, I didn't have that when I was growing up, I don't know how to help my kid figure that out, whatever it is, the same shorthand for being a behavior detective is also a shorthand for figuring out feel good strategies. Literally, just like play. That's why they call me the occupational therapist. Go to the candle aisle at Walmart with your kid and sniff some candles together and be like, which ones do you like, which ones do you not like? Oh wow, it turns out you like flowery scents and it turns out that you hate woodsy scents or whatever it is. Like play, like fun, like you're just figuring out more about your bodies. Try out tasting something new, or try eating something in a different way where you have something on it that you maybe don't like. Try looking at new kinds of lights. We were just in if you've watched Bluey, it's Hammer Barn, basically. It's actually called Bunnings here. It's like a Home Depot or a Lowe's. And my husband was like looking at stuff that we needed, and I was literally like, I'm gonna go to the light aisle and look at all the lights because I like to go to the light aisle and look at all the lights. Like literally, why not? I have found in the last couple of years that I really like lights. I'm very sensory avoidant of almost every sense, but for some reason, really like visual, really like lights. Um, Try it out like play. Try out a disco ball. Um, Try out more movement. Do a dance party together. Do a jump out. Try jumping on the trampoline, or try swinging on a swing, or something that you haven't done in a while because you're an adult. See if it's something that you like. Um, and avoiding stuff is okay too. Trying out stuff that you don't like, or trying out avoiding stuff. Trying out wearing earplugs just to see if it helps make a difference in your regulation, or wearing headphones and listening to white noise, or listening to quiet piano music, or something like that. Trying out doing things in a darker environment than you usually would instead of a brighter environment. Trying out like wearing long sleeves in a time when you would usually wear short sleeves so that you've got less things touching you. Like whatever it is, try out these things more and less, more and less with your kid, modeling it, talking about it. You don't have to know the answers in advance. You're exploring it with your kid. You're doing it alongside them. That's what makes it like a wow, we're all humans and we're learning about our body, as opposed to like I'm the genius and I already know everything and you have to come to me for the answers. Everybody does things all day long to try to make themselves more comfortable in their bodies. Grown-ups do, kids do, everybody does. Everybody does things all day long. It's just that grown-ups can usually do them in a way that is more convenient or less offensive to other people. And so they're usually less challenged on whether or not they're allowed to do that. And kids maybe don't know how to do it in the most convenient way or the least offensive way to other people. And so they might instead be shut down instead of recognizing that what they were doing was a childish attempt to meet a sensory need. So the question that we have is not how do I stop this behavior? How do I get it to stop? What can I do? How can I reward my kid? How can I punish my kid? What kind of consequences can I implement? What kind of boundary can I set? What kind of limits can there be? How do I get them to stop? How do I just make them do it? How do I just make them not do it? But rather, what is the underlying need that they are showing me with what they're doing? What could it mean? What could it be trying to get more of? What could it be trying to get less of? What could they be showing me with what they are doing? Possible. It's okay to do trial and error. It's okay to not get it right, especially if you articulate that to your kid. I think maybe you need this. What if we tried this instead? And maybe they'll be like, oh, I didn't know I was allowed to do that. And maybe they'll be like, that's not at all what I need. And maybe they'll be right, and maybe they'll be wrong. What is the underlying need? How could we work together to meet it? All right.